Welcome everyone, this is the first of our Age of Sigma podcasts. My name is Tim, also known as Geek Control to Major Tim. I have been described by my peers as having all the journalistic integrity and moral fibre of a prune smoothie. To my right is Edman Dennett. Evan is an organiser in the local Age of Sigma and Hobbit community. He's been doing, statewide, Evan?
Mostly just Brisbane-wide.
Mostly just Brisbane-wide. I would say that, Evan, I would describe you as the inventor of the awkward silence, but also the inventor of this local community of Age of Sigma, as far as I'm concerned. It just wouldn't be possible without you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. There's also a complete piece of shit here called Luke. Anyway, so no, Luke is Skaven incarnate. Like this guy puts Monte Cristo levels of effort into just designing filth.
I love Monte Cristo. He's the best caster ever for
Redlands.
Anyway, wrong subject.
All right. So what we wanted to do as our first podcast, we're not going to focus on a particular special subject. We're mostly just going to talk about how Age of Sigma has developed here in Brisbane. How the community has responded to the change from 8th edition over to Age of Sigma, the development of the tourney scene here, and of course just how is the community as a whole responding. So we'll start out. What I thought we would start with is a little bit of an impression of who you guys are as players. So do you mind, Evan, would you like to start? Tell us a little bit about you and your Warhammer background.
Well, pretty much that all started with yourself and Andrew Oldfield there,
Mhm.
Tim.
Yep. Good old AO, who's not joining us tonight, but hopefully will be in the future.
Yeah.
Memory serves, it was 12 years of age. Andrew was going on about at one lunch, and from there it was just rest is history.
Yeah, man. It was, I'm pretty sure I remember it was high school or something like that. We were just talking about shooting the breeze in school, and suddenly here's this guy who won't stop talking about orcs. It's like he's taken his Lord of the Rings obsession and he's found a way to output it into the real world, and he's a good man. He's now one of the top in the local region Age of Sigmar players. But I think when it comes to a propensity for filth, he can't quite match the magnificence, the cheese lord himself, Luke Taylor. Introduce yourself, Luke. Who the fuck are you? And how did you get into Warhammer as a whole?
The first time I ever saw Warhammer was, I remember actually talking about it with you guys in high school.
Yeah.
Particularly you. But you guys, at that stage, you guys didn't have any miniatures. You just played with like little pieces of, you just had to cut out the dimensions of the units.
Warhammer was never cheap.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That was the first time I ever heard about it.
Yeah.
And then, like, when I was about 18,
Mm-hmm.
the Games Workshop at Carindale Shopping Centre opened, and I lived in Wynnum at that time, so I used to go there a lot on my lunch break when I was a chef. And I walked past the shop and I just saw the miniatures in the window, and I was like, oh, that actually looks really cool. So I went in.
You've always had an artistic streak.
Yeah, I used to draw, like, you and me have been drawing comics since, like, year 1 or 2.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I've always, been kind of artistic, but never really painting. More just drawing comic books, like children's comic books.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so Corey was the manager at that stage at that shop. No, it wasn't
Was
Corey.
this Matt Cravat?
No, this was at the Carindale Games Workshop that was in the shopping centre for ages.
Yeah. Only recently disappeared from there.
Yeah, a few years ago now, but yeah.
It probably would have been Marshall that was in charge.
Marshall was it?
Yeah.
Marshall was the manager at that stage, and Corey was like the 2IC.
And of course, I remember seeing you at one of these games. Like, you and I hadn't really seen much of each other since high school, and then suddenly I show up at a Warhammer game. No? How'd this go down?
No.
Evan is the lore master.
No.
Wait, the lore master is about to speak.
Now, this is actually quite funny, because you and I happened to be going back in there for a supply run one day, and we were 18, you would have been 19 at the time, Tim, and it was a case of we walked in there looking around, and I happened to see a familiar soul at the table, and I happened to turn around to Tim, who wasn't paying too much attention to anything. Pretty much your head involved in a blister pack, and I'm facing the other way saying, hey, isn't that Luke Taylor? And you're there with your blister pack in hand going, where? And I'm going, over there at the table. And you go, I don't know. And it's like, well, turn around and look, Tim. And you did. And then I've gone, that's Luke Taylor there, I'm sure of it. And he's gone, oh, you might be right. Like, it is.
Yeah, dude, every time I hear your version of me...
Then we went over there and started talking to him. Sure enough, it was Luke.
Every single time you do an impression of me from the past, and you're like, you had your face in a blister pack. I'm pretty sure you had your face in a pile of coke before you came up with that story, man. But I actually do remember the. Yeah, do
Was
remember
that
seeing it.
Carindale?
I think it was.
It was at the very. It was at Carindale.
I thought it was Macrobat, but anyway, that's not what we're
No,
discussing
Macrobat
here
hadn't been
tonight.
open.
But yeah, so we all kind of came together under late sixth
Yeah.
edition, maybe 7th.
Halfway through 6th Ed was
Yeah.
when I started playing. It's during the Storm of Chaos. Like, basically, Storm of
Yeah.
Chaos was when we started playing, like, weekly games
Yeah.
at 500 points.
Yeah, and that was the reason why I had a perfect memory of you coming on board, because you started during Storm of Chaos with your Eshin list,
Yeah.
which was it's like, it's as if cheese was invented thousands of years ago with the expectation that one day you would be born to play rats doing nothing but cheese.
To this day, that is still my favourite army that I've ever played with.
It's just pure dickishness in miniature form.
Oh, it was great. It was like, it's like cover of darkness, so you can't
Yeah.
shoot me. You can only shoot me the range of the artillery dice times 3. But same with me.
So
The whole army of skirmish.
being somebody who mostly played dwarves at the time, not only was I the most unmaneuverable army, but also the army that focused on artillery, so I was boned from day one against that.
Yeah.
But I actually have one of my quotes here that I've written for you was the effect that you went on to have, because you became a big tourney player, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Your
6th and 7th edition was when I played a lot competitively.
Yeah. The effect I feel you had on the tournament scene, like the effect you had on your players, I think it was instrumental in the invention of Christobation. Like, I think people wept themselves to sleep at night after playing.
I wasn't that bad, not in 6th and 7th anyway.
Well, I remember basically being thoroughly smashed out of the game by you. Like, by that point, I was kind of pulling out, and for those of you who, I haven't introduced myself, I got started probably in around 1995 with these miniatures. I was tail end of 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I got a good dose of 5th edition. That's where I think I really got started with my Empire army at the time. The game almost went from being ridiculous at that point to going very edgy and gritty, and it went back to more about block units and maneuvers with 6th edition, and it really became the game of Movehammer at that point. It stopped
really
being about stacking your units with as much cool shit as you could get, or having that one lord who had 90% of your army's points put into him, and it became very, very, very deeply structured and very much about units and maneuvers and a very tactical game in that respect. Now, I disappeared off the scene probably some way into 7th edition, had very little to do with 8th edition, and the really weird thing for me was I had no idea about the end times. I saw that said a couple of times, but I was at college, I had nothing to do with it, and then probably about 6 months ago, I just decided randomly to Google Games Workshop and saw Age of Sigma. What do you think that was like for me, guys?
That would have been a big shock.
Yeah, what do you think, Evan? What do you think my reaction was?
Well, your action would have been something interesting, quite comical. I can picture your face, but it's hard to describe.
I mean, I think, God, I looked at it and I'm like, friggin' Space Marines! What the hell? What the hell? I was at work at the time. I basically had to take the afternoon off. I had to go home. I was just like, I know I had taken Warhammer for granted for a while, but I had taken Warhammer for granted.
Yeah,
you know,
like,
it's a thing.
It's gone.
It's like Lord of the Rings. Like you walk away from Lord of the Rings for a while, you come back and you find that the Galactic Empire from Star Wars invaded. You know, like what the hell's going on? But at the same time, Age of Sigma, I mean, the best quote I've heard of it so far is, for people who were big fans of Warhammer, and Warhammer has now become Warhammer Age of Sigma, for those of you who were big fans of the old edition, who may have missed out a little bit like me, the best quote I can think of to say is, that was then, and this is now. We now have a completely new system. The miniatures from the old game are still usable. G-Dubs actually handed out rules for them all for free. And all in all, the game plays great from everything I've seen so far. It's very easy to get into. It's relatively cheap to get into compared to what I've seen in the past. And one of the biggest focuses I've noticed personally is it's not forcing you to do anything. There's none of this minimum core, maximum number of points to be put into special and heroes and stuff like that. If you want to bring 3 dragons, you bring 3 dragons.
Yeah.
It may be stupid, but you bring 3 dragons.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's one of the coolest things about the game. You can just do whatever you want.
I mean, Evan, did you ever think about that when you were playing the older editions? You just thought to yourself, why do I have to take this?
Well, many times. It was only only recently when 40k got its Unbound rule set where you could take whatever you wanted there as well, and an Apocalypse. And thought at the time was, you know, eventually at some point fantasy has to get something like this. It has to.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, if you were at a 20, you were playing tournament rules, you had your restrictions in place like you do in a normal game. But if you're at home bored, Sunday evening before work, with someone, and hobby came up, you would literally just put down whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
So it was a case of, you're going to do it anyway.
Part of the fun, yeah.
Let's give people what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that probably makes us all sound pretty sweet, like pretty into Age of Sigma. Like, I think now we're all pretty accepting of it. We love what we play these days.
Yeah.
It was traumatic, though. Like, let's face it, that was taking an established continuity, a very known world, a very known concept. The old world, Lustria, Ulthuan, Norsca. You've got this, an established canon, a world that is like Middle-earth or something like that, or like the Star Wars universe. You know certain things there. You have an established lore, and saying, right, we're going to put a cap on that and go somewhere else with this. We're not doing that anymore. We're not going to do those rule sets. We're not going to tweak a little something or chop and change a little bit like with 7th and 8th edition. And we're not pissing about. We're saying the end of the world actually happens. We're taking a universe where for the last 25, 30 years, the game has been all about how the end of the world is just around the corner, and the whole point of the game is to hold that off, delay the end of the world for as long as possible.
Or try and end the world.
Or try and end the world. You can be the guys who are trying to end the world. And guess what? They win.
Yeah, they won.
Yeah. It was the Matt Ward apocalypse. Like, you know, it's over. End times have put a cap on it.
Yeah.
We're done here.
Yeah, but they told everyone that was going to happen well in advance too. Like, they released a game set called End Times.
Yeah.
Like a whole new set of rules to tell you that it's coming to an end. Here's like some really powerful shit to make things overpowered for like 6 months.
But to be even more fair than that, we knew over 30 years ago that it was going to end.
Well, he didn't say exact date or anything like that. I mean, it was always... I mean, look at, again, Lord of the Rings, I know I'm using that example a lot, but much of the point of that world is they're constantly making a big deal about the fact that the apocalypse is there, man, but there's always the fight, and that's a grand old theme from literature. The constant battle against evil. You can never win, but you can hold out, and that's the whole point of life.
Yeah.
And yet these guys killed it. They shot it in the head. They took it out behind the sheds and looked it in its big brown puppy dog eyes and put a bullet right then and there. People were legitimately pissed.
People burnt their armies on YouTube.
Yeah.
Fucking idiots. Just sell it.
Yeah. Or you know what? I don't know. Continue playing with Warhammer rules.
Well, exactly, because it's
the rules you already got.
It's not like the book spontaneously combusted, and
Yeah.
this is one of the biggest beefs I know Evan's had with a lot of players that like rage quit. It was like, well,
Yeah, Evan, get your beef out. I want to hear all
you
about
can still
that.
play the game. The game's like Games Workshop didn't say, all right, you now have to hand in your old rule books because they're no longer supported.
Mm. There have still been tournaments, haven't there? In
Yes.
8th edition and the unofficial 9th edition rules?
Yeah.
Pretty much, and they're quite common too, and that's great. You know, that's always going to be a thing amongst the community, the 9th Age community, where they continuously develop their own product. But yeah, I've raised it enough before where, you know, folks are just like, oh, you know, fantasy's dead. It's a case of, well, no, you still got your rule books in your house. No one's come knocking at your door to take them off you. You still have your minis. Guys, have a game. Seriously, they don't magically disappear from your house just because you know, a creator of the game has decided to go a different way or release a new set of rules.
Yeah, and given that the new set of rules is there, the PDFs were handed out for free for people to use miniatures in the new set of rules. While you're at it, continuing to play the game that you're perfectly well entitled to keep playing, and nobody's telling you that that's unplayable anymore. Why not try out the new rules? Just have a go at it. Like, maybe you'll like it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. And even if you don't, it's a case of continue playing previous editions. Myself, I still play 5th edition fantasy and even 2nd edition 40k. Good systems. Nothing wrong with them.
Now, a simple comparison to make here is with, say, comic book movies and not so much movies, comic book continuities and stuff like that. They often have changes in them, but the changes tend to snap back. Like the changes, Bruce Wayne dies, Dick Grayson takes over, but you know what? People really don't come to Batman for Dick Grayson or someone like that. You don't come to Captain America for Bucky Barnes or someone. You come for Steve Rogers. This is that idea of the bounce back, and that's kind of what's been going on with Warhammer for a long time. Like, we've been dealing with the same characters, the same world. Every time they tried to make a fairly big change...
They couldn't.
It couldn't. Nothing ever stuck. And that seems to be something that I actually argue, for the sake of argument, people like that. Why do people start reading Batman in the first place? They know what they're in for. They know there's a comfort there, there's something that they can go to every single time. And taking that away from someone, while it can be rejuvenating, while it can be a little bit shocking, would you guys agree that there's also such thing as, taking it too far? Like, you pick up a Batman comic, you open it up, and his outfit's pink.
Yeah, that'd be pretty funny.
It would. But it's now, Dick Grayson only wearing pink from now on. Only stands in daylight, never goes out at night. You would be a little bit miffed, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So, do you feel like the reactions that you've been seeing, the army burning, but particularly, we won't call it a childish reaction, but...
It's childish, though. It's so
the
childish.
pushback
Yeah.
from that particular community.
The veteran players,
Yeah.
quote unquote.
Some people have been pushing for this idea that Age of Sigma does not deserve its place.
I disagree with that.
Particularly with the online community.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience of that. We'll start with you, Luke, and we'll move over to you.
So I used to frequent the Wargamer AU forums quite a lot back when I played in Tournament heaps.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't for a while, because...
Basically to feed off of the tears of your fallen victims, I imagine.
Yeah, and find out...
Hear the lamentations of their women.
Find out when tournaments and stuff are happening. Anyway, what was the question again?
The question was, what's your experience been of the veteran community, as you put it?
Okay, they're a bunch of whiny, sooky children, to put it politely, on the internet at least. They're a lot different in person.
Yeah.
They don't whinge about it as much in person, they actually listen to you in person.
Would you say that in person, when they see guys like you, it humanizes the whole thing? It, means that they can't just point to the amorphous blob that is Games Workshop, the huge supposedly monolithic corporation that is constantly giving away its license to any video game company that puts up so much as a pack of gum, as collateral. Do you feel like maybe this is just angst? This is just attacking something that's not really there?
I just think they didn't like the change.
Mm.
They didn't like the change, and they were pissed off that Games Workshop didn't keep continuing the game on. But why would they keep continuing a game that's losing money every month?
Mm.
That game was single-handedly losing the money every month. They couldn't really keep supporting it anymore.
My experience, though I mentioned I missed most of 8th edition, was I kind of looked in every once in a while from outside, and all I seemed to see was big centerpiece miniatures. It was things like Finecast, there were things like every army suddenly had monstrous infantry and monstrous cavalry. Yeah. Every army suddenly had giant monsters, even where it seemed inappropriate. Yeah. Suddenly it was it stunk a little bit of cash grabbing. I know people accuse Games Workshop of that a lot, but it really felt like they were milking any possible way they could get people to buy some new minis, something big and flash, and that you just were not going to win if you didn't have those kind of units. Yeah, that's how they did it in 8th edition. That's their old CEO. He was an idiot. he basically just disconnected from the community entirely. Yeah. And that started basically when 8th came out. Yeah. So they really weren't doing what was right. From my perspective, this was one of the things I almost felt kept me away at the time was I love Warhammer. I can't get that across enough. I have actually had difficulty not thinking about Warhammer lately. Like, that's coming from a guy who spent like 8 years away from the game.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I'm thinking about it every night. I'm not even playing that much, but with things like Total War Warhammer, with the huge resurgence in the games, the success of the Horus Heresy novels, and now my re-entry into Age of Sigma, this is on my mind all the time.
Yeah.
I just feel like something's going right here at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's just a really fun game.
Yeah, but the reaction of the online community, I guess I was focusing on that was, what did you end up doing? Like when you found, because your experience that you relayed to me was to do with the fact that you would put up literally anything whatsoever in your own Age of Sigma forum. It's not the overall Warhammer forum. It's just Age of Sigma, a sub-forum just for Age of Sigma content. What was happening?
People from the Ninth Age forums would just come in and just turn every thread into a negative GW or Age of Sigma bashing thread.
Just spam it.
Just basically deliberately, that's what every thread would get turned into. So I just had enough, and I just I'm like, fuck this, I'm just going to say something back.
Yeah.
And I did, and the moderator agreed with me, so they basically got told, go away and go and whinge about GW in a different
open forums or somewhere else. Yeah.
Don't do it in Sigma.
Yeah. So from my understanding, like, you articulated it pretty well. You didn't just suddenly start bashing back.
No.
You just said...
I used facts.
Yeah. And, of course, the moderators agreed because the simple fact was you were in a forum for a specific subject and you were being not allowed to speak.
Pretty much. Right. And if I did, I was bashed for saying that it was a good game or something like that.
Yeah, for not immediately hating.
Yeah.
Evan, you were more in the sort of the Warhammer, but also the Hobbit scene before AOS really came up, weren't you?
Pretty much, yeah. Like I stepped back from tournaments in fantasy a long time ago, and focused just on hobby development. Then got involved in Hobbit for 2 years.
You've also kept the fire burning on Mordheim as well. Like, I don't know anyone who has put that level of like sheer willpower into keeping like an almost like a pretty much dead specialist game alive. Like, you brought it back into places like Mount Gravatt Store.
Pretty much, yeah. There was a period there where I did revive it, and that has actually paid off in a big long way. In that, through that and through keeping it up, and just through social media, and just promoting the product. Actually got in touch with none other than the creator of the game himself, Thomas Perrinan, who is actually on my Mordheim Masterclass page as a member. And we get some interesting feedback from him. Actually, when he put the call out for people wanting to meet him, everyone wanted to do it, but they're all hesitant at first. I jumped in and met him over Skype, video chat, you could say face to face because it was via VidLink, but it was a great experience. What's if you were to tell 12-year-old me that you would one day be sitting up at 4 o'clock in the morning with a cup of tea with the creator of Mordheim, I wouldn't have believed you. I would not have believed you at all. So,
well, thanks to you, even I've spoken briefly to him, and like in the one message he sent me, I think I fangirled out myself. Like, I had to run away holding. No, anyway.
Well, pretty much. There was certainly a bit of that at the time. I'll keep it brief, but there was a lot of that at the time. Where it was a case of one guy actually got banned from the Mordheim world page when Thomas emerged and jumped on. There was a lot of, it was essentially, I'm not going to sugarcoat, it was essentially a suck fest. But one guy, he got banned because folks were saying things like, oh, Thomas, if I was a woman, I'd have your children. Oh, man,
God.
You are a god to me. One guy actually got banned for saying, Thomas, my ass is yours anytime you want.
Oh my God.
It was just like,
that's a lot of love for a game.
It's a lot of love. But, wrapping up there with the Broheim, it was a case of, long story short, I am actually one of 20 handpicked people helping Thomas develop his latest game. Won't say too much on the podcast, but it's
big stuff working in the background. Thomas is back in business, but let's talk Age of Sigma, man. So, what happened?
Sigma. Yes, Sigma first.
What the fuck happened then? No, let me put it to you, because I want to actually, as I was saying, play devil's advocate on this one. And I got to ask you something. It's like, okay, Evan, you played Warhammer, right? Like Warhammer.
Mhm.
You played Warhammer, that game. You
Yes,
know the
I-
game with the miniatures and such?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Tim.
Okay. And you played 5th edition.
Yes, I did, Tim.
You played 6th edition.
Yes, I did, Tim.
You played 7th edition.
Yes,
You played 8th edition.
correct.
Okay. All right. Did you like those?
I did.
They were all right.
Sure,
Did you like the old world and all that?
sure did.
What was it? You liked? Okay. Well, we're talking about the same game, right?
I believe so.
All right. Now you say that you like Age of Sigma.
Sure, why not? To a point.
You see, you've lost me there. Like, I just. Why do you hate Warhammer so much? All right. I'm not bashing on the guys who are having trouble with it. I'm just saying it's a big thing to cope with. Now, you were really there the whole time. What was your experience of this coming out? Like, what did you see as a big member of the community?
Well, I guess it sort of helped for me to get to stay in tune with it because, unlike most gamers, I actually was more involved in like the lore side of things. That's LORE. You know, I love
You are also the law.
I'm the lure.
Yeah.
No. You know, I actually
That's not the law. I am the law. Go on.
I actually did you know, follow the novels.
Yeah.
So kept that up. Then there was a period where we had nothing. Then boom, we had the game. Suddenly, a series of novels came out associated with the rules as a filler, bring everyone up to speed. A shock would have come to a lot of people there for not out. You know, it's an age-old thing. People don't read.
Yeah.
You know, folks do not read. Period. Hell,
4-page rules.
yeah.
Yeah.
So 4-page rules, no excuse. I mean, you know,
It's
sure.
not 4-page rules.
Now, you know, 4-page rules to get you started, not hard. In fact, in many ways, it's great. But yeah, just fell in love with the story. That won me over. Played a game, thought, yeah, I get what they're trying to do here. I get it because again, read the stories. So essentially, we armies aren't fully developed yet, which is why we don't have rank and file troops, and they're all in skirmish
Well,
formations.
point costs.
Point costs.
They
Well,
weren't there.
point costs.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let's talk about point costs. They weren't there. But with that said, that was part of the plan because it was a case of this world is starting up again. You've got to put together your army. You know, that's the involving the player, making them part of the story as well. I mean, you pick up any strategy game and play story mode. You start off with just one hero, and then you've got to build your army up from there. No different to this game, except in physical model form on a tabletop.
And if somebody else shows up with something bigger than yours, like, isn't it sometimes thematic for the other guy to not be equal?
Well, yes,
Yeah.
indeed, and this is
rules for it.
And this is why Warhammer Siege was so popular with me. Was that attacker defender? You know, your attacker typically had more points because
He's
when
gotta
you went
overcome
when you
obstacles.
went to war, you had to overcome obstacles, as you just said, Tim. So you take more men, you take enough to get the job done.
10-1 historically, if you were going to be attacking a built-up position.
Yeah, and let's not forget, like myself and the old boy, he typically had 10,000 points, back when I only had about 1,000 points starting up. So it was a case of, righto, we're going to play on Sunday. Yes, Dad.
You're going to get thrashed on Sunday. Yes, Dad.
Pretty much.
Did he play his 10,000 points against your one?
Yes, he would.
That's cruel.
Your dad's great, though. Like a furious Scotsman, for those of you who've never met him.
Well, Welsh, but
Oh, sorry.
Welsh, Northern English. Mostly Northern English. He sounds like a Scotsman.
He does
He
sound
does.
like
I
a
always
furious
thought he was
Scotsman.
Especially when he's drunk.
Can we close our eyes and pretend he's a furious Scotchman? Yeah.
Anyway, it was a case of, and we even did it. We even just said, look, what do you want to play with? That's what we put down. We wouldn't bother with points on some, as I said before, Sunday evening when you got nothing to do and
Getting ready to be thrashed by Dad.
pretty much.
Anyway,
And when you're 12, that was the case. But it's interesting because since I've been, in the years after that, so by the time I was 14, I already had a decent army, and then he was saying please and calling me sir. So it's a case of, there you go.
Well, I mean, on a very similar note, like, we've more or less gotten our reactions now. How do people cope with Age of Sigma and all that? We now know Evan is a confirmed hater of all things Warhammer. On that very similar note about bring what you will, it's also the idea of the grand alliances and things like that. Like, we've now got the ability to just bring some high elves along with some human/Stormcast forces. And to be frank, this kind of works. It's the same reason why that open system in 40k kind of works. Think of any great story from not just the Warhammer lore, but, God, I keep bringing it up, the Lord of the Rings. You've always got these things where someone else shows up. Or if the elves are there, they're usually a small elite cadre backing up a huge human force or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you think 40k, is it really big armies of Space Marines, or in most of the lore, isn't it like the Imperial Guard are barely holding out, and then like a single drop pod shows up, and like one squad of Space Marines bursts out and turns the tide of battle, saves the day?
Generally in narrative, it's one Marine, if they're lucky. If they're lucky.
Yeah. And if it's Captain Titus showing up from 40k Space Marine, for those of you who played that one, it's his pinky finger showing up, being deployed to just like flatten the entire square kilometer out on its own and punch demon princes to death. Like a man, this first, love that bit. And like that ending of the game, some people give that shit, but for being a quick time event. But he punched a demon prince to death with his fists. Surprised he didn't just pull out his armored dick and just beat it to death, smack it back and forth. Anyway, we should bring this back online. So, where are we at now, guys? Tell me about the community now. Where are we? So that was then, and this is now. Where are we at?
It's starting to develop and get bigger, which is good. The key to that is just to sort of start doing regular games with even just your regular group of mates, and then tell people about it. And like games night on Thursday night down at Warhammer Capella Bar is always normally packed. Like, if we want to play down there, because there's normally between 4 to 6 of us, we have to book tables. But that's a good thing, like that we're getting that sort of starting to play now, which is good. Wasn't like that for a while. So,
what about you, Evan? What do you think about the community, the tournament scene? Tell me what you think about the current state of Warhammer.
Well, geez, like a lot of folks just sort of stepped back from it because they didn't know. Again, it's that whole people being people, where the establishment's not there, so they just back away and they wait for folks to step up and build it first, which most of us have done. Shout out to the Toowoomba City Wargamers. Clint and the boys, they were the first to launch the first major tournament in Queensland, which we attended.
good day.
Very good day.
I heard you boys did all right in that one.
Yeah, we did alright.
I'd say we did okay, first, second, third best painted. But yeah.
To the avarice there.
But 4 out of 5 isn't bad. But great bunch down there.
Yeah.
And we met them, and I've been sharing ideas with Clint, and he actually had his second tourney about 2 weeks ago, I believe. It was 2 weeks ago.
I think they're just calling them games days.
And again, it was another big hit. We've got one coming up in 2 days' time, using Clash Cop system. We got 14 people signed up for that one, so that's looking pretty good. A few more Games Workshop in-stores ones coming up, but the independent ones are going to have a bigger numbers just due to halls, and we've got a bit more freedom. So it is a bit unfortunate the stores can't support the numbers, but the community's there, and we will make it happen. There is actually at this stage it is going ahead. In November there will be the first ever Brisbane, Age of Sigma. Can't use any other words, so I'm just going to flat out say it. I'm going to call it what it is. It's a GT. It's a grand tournament. So that will be on in, not too far from here, in Wellington Point.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Barely even have to step out the door for that one.
Yeah.
No. So, yeah. So just, folks out there who are actually listening to this podcast, yeah, it is actually going to be a thing run by me. So get ready.
Excellent. So, I guess as a closer there, would you say that for all the people who've stepped back, for the people who've burnt armies, but we'll talk more about the people who've mainly just shied away up until this point, I get the feeling that you've said, Evan, that you feel like people will step away until the edifice has been reconstructed, until the game has to rebuild itself. But also, we've lost a few who are claiming they'll never come back. And does anyone have anything they actually want to get across to those folks in particular?
Yeah, folks who turn their back and claim they'll never come back, it's a bit sad because you're going to miss out. You're going to miss out on what all of it. The camaraderie, the hobby, the stories, like just being involved. I mean,
Pure filth of Luke and your list, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
The opportunity to be thrashed violently in front of your friends and tell them who sent you.
Jesus, it's not that bad.
Oh, come on, dude. You don't so much build an army list as you spend hours staring with the light reflecting from your eyes in front of your glowing computer monitor with arched fingers.
I actually do spend a lot. I probably spend most of my free time building lists and reading rules.
And guys, that's what you're up against. So if you want to turn the backs, like Evan, you round it out, man.
Yeah, well, no, it's just like, guys, if you've turned your back, it's sad to say, hope you do come back. But
You're always welcome.
yeah, always welcome. The doors left open.
If you find a way to reconstitute your incinerated armies, like, that's impressive.
A lot of them have gone to play Flames of War.
Yeah, and you know what? Flames is a great game, too.
Kings of War.
Sorry, Kings of War.
Oh,
Kings
sorry.
of War, my bad.
Flames of War is a great game, too.
Kings of War, Kings of War,
Kings of War.
Kings of War.
And you know something, I've even heard a lot of people say it, is games like Total War Warhammer have just gone huge. Like that game, whether you're into the Total War series or not, I'm a huge fan myself. I blog about that one on Geek Control, the Major Tim blog. Those games are going huge, and that's going to bring more new blood, but it's also bringing interest into Warhammer the Old World as well. Like, I'm not saying we're never, ever, ever going to see the Old World, at least in some incarnation. It may even end up being a kind of a realm in Age of Sigma, who knows? The point about Age of Sigma, what makes this world great, is it has more or less done what 40k had and Warhammer never had. Uncapped opportunity and potential.
Yeah.
When we're talking an infinite number of worlds, you may get what you want after all, who knows, but you've always got your game to play, one way or another.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just to expand on that, it is exactly that, Tim. It's in the old world we were restricted to just the planet, whereas you pick up any other, whether it be mythical or otherwise, but you pick on any fantasy outside of the GW, what they have is what's effectively the 9 realms, which is what Sigma is now, and they needed that in the beginning. Like you look at 40k, they've got infinite universes, where anything possible can happen, and it's the same in the 9 realms in true fantasy. Unfortunately, Games Workshop Warhammer was so restricted to just one planet of that.
Yeah.
It was so restricted, it needed to happen, and now that they've effectively got 9 realms rebadged, Age of Sigma, here it is. It's still the same thing, but 9 realms. There's folks out there claiming that certain armies have disappeared, but you can't tell me that in an infinite universe that you won't find someone out there in full plate mail with a fleur-de-lis somewhere on that uniform.
Or a mummy riding a chariot.
Or a mummy riding a chariot.
Well, they talk about the
let's not forget, when they visit the mortal realms, people die. You can't tell me in an infinite world where there's infinite mortal realms that no one embalms, and there's no such thing as magic and a necromancer, yeah, if that's what you're telling me, you're going to need to actually pick up a fantasy book and have a read.
Well, I'm going to round that one out now. I think I want to close up on a point here, which is, aside from those points, which are excellent, nobody has taken anything away from you. A
No.
book can always be reread. And I think Warhammer is a book that just happens to have a final chapter to it. You know, the Warhammer Fantasy Battle universe has a final chapter, and you can always read that one again.
Exactly.
You can start with Sigma and the Umberogan tribes and all that stuff. Like, there's a pretty strong chance, I think, at some point Games Workshop will even investigate that in game terms. The Warhammer Fantasy Battle Wars, as long as you got your miniatures and you got your books, but more importantly, you got that story in your heart, it may happen to have a last chapter, but you can reread it anytime you like.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, you're always going to have that. I mean, if you don't revisit your old books, what's the point? You know, you reread a book again, sometimes you see things a different way because your perspective has changed and
Yeah.
you see it a bit differently.
That's
You go,
why...
oh, I didn't get that before, maybe that's what they meant.
Yeah.
You know, you see things in a different light and you pick up on things you missed. You may have been half asleep when you read a chapter, who knows?
It's almost why your community there with Mordheim, people who have found ways to reinvigorate their interest in Necromunda, and things like Battlefleet Gothic, another game that came out recently, it's drawn new eyes and new crowds because these are great stories and they may as well be retold. Some of them have an end, some of them don't, some of them are left open. But I think Age of Sigma is a new book that's opened up. And I'm not saying let's put away and burn our copies of Warhammer.
That's all.
Let's let's put it on the shelf and let's reread it another time. How's that sound to you guys?
Yeah, I've read it too many times now. I think I read the 7th. Actually, I kept the 7th edition rulebook, but I hated 8th edition, so I sold all my 8th stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
I support that. You know, I mean, I've still got every single book I've ever owned for fantasy, rules or otherwise, and I reference it pretty frequently whenever I do any hobby. You know, you go through there, you see how it used to look and what colours we used back then, and you draw it back together, you draw it to the present. You know, you got to, you know, once you're an expert, you send yourself back to school. You never stop learning, you never stop revisiting. Doesn't matter if it's hobby or any other facet of life. You know, you've got to look at your previous experience and build on them. Otherwise, what are you? And you know, that's just how it is with hobby.
All right. Well, I think we've done a pretty good start up here. Like, I'm happy with what we've chatted about today, and we'll come back with maybe more specialized topics in future. So,
Yeah.
for now, we have been Luke Taylor, the Cheese Master General himself. Evan, like a kind of a strategically shaved badger who looks like he might have left the gas on, and myself, a flabby bearded kid who just happens to love the sound of his own voice. So my name's Tim, from Geek Control to Major Tim, and I don't know, it's been great. I'll chat to you guys again next time.
See you guys later.
Peace out.